JC, welcome back. It's Barely Qualified Picks, and it is week 14 in the NFL. I can't wait to talk with you today. We got treated to one of the best Thanksgiving weeks of football ever, not just in NFL, but in college. We're only going to talk about NFL today. And that has actually set us up for what was already looking like a great week 14. And now week 14 is shaping up to be the best week of the NFL regular season thus far.
Huge legitimacy test for a number of teams this week. And there are a lot of teams that are really just clinging to a hair when it comes to their playoff hopes that we're probably going to see them dashed away. When it comes to the teams that could actually be eliminated, I think we're looking at like the Falcons, Vikings, and Commanders from the NFC, and then really just the Jets and the Browns. But man, a lot of matchups across the board. We are now firmly in December, and we talk about the witching hour in football games. I feel like December is like the witching month in how divisions unfold, the wild card race unfolds, and for the MVP race unfolds too. This is where that MVP contender really sets themselves apart. Last week, teams are on byes too.
I agree. And I do want to come back to your point on who we can actually cross off. As you mentioned, there are only a couple of teams in the AFC that are technically eliminated. And some of those teams, like you have a 5-7 Miami team that I think we would both agree does not have a path forward, even though they're not technically eliminated. And then behind them, you have a 4-8 Cincinnati team that we'll get to as we talk about Thanksgiving here in a second, that I think is very much not eliminated from consideration. But before we get to all that, let's go back to Thanksgiving Day. Then we'll talk about Black Friday. But on Thanksgiving Day, we had three really incredible games. They all delivered. All of them. And I didn't expect that. I don't think anybody did expect that. The Packers beat the Lions. The Lions fall to 2-8 in their last 10 Thanksgiving games. And I think it's tough. It's always a playoff atmosphere, but that can't feel good when every year the Lions are having a playoff atmosphere Thanksgiving game, and most years are losing it. Last year they beat the Bears, and the Bears were pretty bad. But big win for the Packers, bad loss for the Lions. It puts them in a pretty precarious position. Then in our middle of the day game, we had the Kansas City Chiefs as favorites going into Dallas, and then they lost outright to the Cowboys 31-28 in a game where Patrick Mahomes threw 4 touchdowns, but it didn't feel like a great game for Patrick Mahomes. It didn't feel like a great game for the Chiefs. It was one where they were always kind of chasing. And then finally, Joe Burrow makes his return in Baltimore on Thursday night and doesn't just beat the Ravens, but stomps the Ravens 32-14. So for your money, who won Thanksgiving?
From an impact to the postseason perspective, I have to plant the flag in Green Bay. They swept the Lions, who everybody views as their big opponent when it comes to the NFC North. And I know that the Chicago Bears are very much in there, and they have 2 games.
They are, but can I just say, Chicago Bears 9-3, currently in first place in the NFC, but they have the 7th shortest odds, so 7th best odds to actually win the NFC right now. Vegas does not believe. They believe they will make the playoffs at this point, but not that they are a real contender to win the NFC.
And we'll touch on the Bears when we talk about our Black Friday game and the schedule that they have ahead of them. But I think it has to be the Packers to go in, complete that sweep, and do it in, kind of dominant fashion. That was a close game.
Dominant fashion.
A close game. It was a 1-score game at the end of it, but it felt like very similar to the Chiefs. The Lions were chasing that game from beginning to end.
Well, and it was an interesting game where there were only 6 of the 55 points scored in the first and fourth quarter. The other 49 points all came in those middle 2 quarters, the second and third quarter. And to your point, when that Packer offense got rolling, it just felt like the Lions defense had far fewer answers than the Packers defense did for the Lions offense. And you got to the fourth quarter, and it wasn't like there were a bunch of fireworks or anybody, certainly, Jordan Love didn't go win the game down the stretch necessarily, but, they did get the ball back up a touchdown with Detroit having a chance to get a stop and go get a score and tie it. And they never gave the ball back.
They got it done. They converted when they needed to convert, and they iced the game away, which you weirdly just don't see as much of in the NFL. You see a lot of conservative play calling, but credit to Matt LaFleur. I know that he was on our list of teams that are winning records despite of their coaches, but he really came in with a great game plan and got it done this week.
He outclassed Dan Campbell, and that was a big difference there. So I agree with you. Packers win in terms of playoff impact and what it means for the NFC North. But I'm going to give it to the Bengals, and I'm going to give it to them on a completely different dimension. Usually by the time we get to Thursday night, we're sleepy from the turkey anyways, and the football puts us to bed. There was no going to bed. It was a 32-14 game, but there was no going to bed in this game. It was exciting. It was, I think, inspiring to see the Bengals come back with Burrow and play the way that they did. No T. Higgins, as you talked about last week. So it was Burrow and Jamar Chase. We unfortunately took the under on Chase yards.
Yeah, we did. That was my fault.
The Ravens would bracket the shit out of him. I was with you. I mean, why wouldn't they just take Chase out of the game as much as possible?
I think they tried.
I was going to say, and then we were reminded that you can do that in your mind. Doing that in reality is actually not something that you can just choose to do. And they weren't successful, and the Bengals showed that with Joe Burrow behind center, and that defense got 5 turnovers, 4 fumbles, and then an interception. If the defense can even be 20% better than they've been this season, the Bengals are 2 games back of the Ravens and Steelers.
And they split with the Steelers. This weekend. It's not like the Steelers have the tiebreak or anything along those lines. Joe Flacco gave them a gift in his one win as a starter for the Cincinnati Bengals of the last several weeks, and that was to give them a little bit of hope with how things are framing out. And the Steelers, in a little bit of a free fall, Ben Roethlisberger himself even said maybe it's time to clear house a little bit. What they have is not working. They just signed Adam Thielen, and my heart goes out to that guy. I don't think he wanted to leave the Vikings to go die on another roster that's probably going to miss the playoffs. I think he was maybe hoping to even go back to Carolina or go somewhere
to
like
Minnesota
Buffalo.
To Pittsburgh. That's a shitty season.
Oh, it's if he had stayed at Carolina, he might be contending for an NFC South division. That's the crazy part. But coming back to the matter at hand, the other thing I'll say is one of the things Joe Burrow does is, I've said multiple times, he doesn't play defense, but what he really does is he leads these long, slow, methodical drives that he doesn't go 3 and out often, and he gives his defense a chance to breathe while also somehow limiting possessions for the other team by bleeding clock.
Winning
that matters.
It's huge. It's huge. I completely agree. And I think that Bengals win was impressive on multiple fronts, not just because it kept us awake. I don't want to move on from Thursday before we do just give a tip of the cap to the Cowboys, though, because this is a game coming in where it was like, hey, the Cowboys have won a couple games in a row, but they did lose that stinker to Arizona. Who are they really? The offense, nobody doubted that the offense was great. As you and I have talked about, Javonte Williams hasn't gotten injured yet. He's sort of Aaron Jones senior light, so we expect that at some point. But it hasn't happened yet, and the Cowboys offense has been flying. And then they beat the Chiefs, and all of a sudden we have the Cowboys 2 games back after we talk about Friday of the Eagles, and the Chiefs now finally have plus odds to make the playoffs. Finally, Vegas has seen a little bit of the light, but I'll tell you, the odds still aren't great on a yes-no basis. The Chiefs are not making the playoffs at this point. They're 6-6. They would have to run the table, and when you look at their schedule, and I'm sure we'll talk about this in a little bit, there's no way.
It's a brutal road to hoe to finish, and one thing I'll say is credit to Dak. He started that game off essentially with an interception, and then like a goldfish, to quote Ted Lasso, he was lights out the rest of the game and put them in a position where the Chiefs just had to chase. Unfortunately, they don't have Jamar Chase as much as Patrick Mahomes, I'm sure, wishes they do, and they just weren't able to get it done. And to your point, the Chiefs are in a really tough spot. And this is
home to Houston,
uncharted territory
to the Chargers, at the Titans, home to the Broncos, at the Raiders. So the one thing that they have in their favor is both of their road games are easy, and their 3 tough games are all at home. But do you believe they're going to go 5-0 against that slate? Like if you were to put odds on it, you give them 20% odds of going 5-0 against that, 10% odds. Where would you fall on that right now?
I would think 10%. I think they are going to drop one of those 3 at least when you count Houston, an LA Chargers team that somehow is still in playoff contention, and Harbaugh brings those guys to bear every time. And I know LA was healthier earlier in the season, but LA's already beaten them once. They have that in their mind that they are good enough to beat these guys when they're
Although what happens with
at full
Herbert,
strength.
he did
True.
just have hand surgery, non-throwing hand, but you don't want your quarterback out there getting any part of their body beat around after surgery. And we're talking about a game that's going to take place next week.
True. And then the last one of those is Denver. And Denver somehow, as we saw Monday night, continues to pull these horseshoes out of their ass and win games by the skin of their teeth. So at least one of those. And personally, I think it's going to be this week. Stroud's knocking the rust off. Willie Anderson is going to get after Pat Mahomes. It's going to be rough against that defensive front four this week against Houston, that we're able to go into Indianapolis and get that job done.
Now, if Kansas City can go, call it 3-2 against that slate, and they can get to 9-8, is that potentially enough? I would think not, because you look right now, the 7th seed is Buffalo at 8-4, and then Houston at 7-5. You and I were talking about this before the show. If Kansas City's hopes aren't quite dead yet, they will be if they don't beat Houston. And that Houston pass rush is going to get after Mahomes, going to get absolutely after him. And if he can't take the top off, and he can't get Rashee Rice or Xavier Worthy to play the role that Jackson Smith and Jigba did, where he moved all over the field, he ran a bunch of different routes on the route tree, and Houston just couldn't keep track of him and couldn't pin him down, Houston's going to win that game.
I haven't looked to see who's the favorite. I'm assuming it's the Chiefs, but man, I struggle to see a world where the Texans don't keep the Chiefs under 17 points, and this Chiefs defense has not looked like it has in years past. I kind of thinking the Texans are going to put up 20-23, somewhere in those lines. The other thing, you mentioned the Bills. The Bills have the tiebreak. They won the regular season game, as they have the last 5 years or whatever it is against these
There's
Chiefs.
a reason why the Chiefs are 10th right now. They're behind everybody. They don't have a tiebreaker over anyone. The Jaguars, the Texans, anyone. So they're in tough shape. Okay, John, let's talk about Friday, because this, for me, was the best win of the entire week. You have a Bears team that had 2 4-game win streaks on the year, separated by a loss at Baltimore when Lamar came back.
And Lamar didn't play in that game. That was the backup. Yeah.
Oh, God, that
was a baffling loss, that they were up 14-3 or 14-7, and Caleb looked great. Rome had a score early, and then they just could not stop Tyler Huntley to save their lives. And then they rip off another 4-game win streak. Like, what is this team?
And yet, they rip off those 2 4-game win streaks, and everybody, including me, looked at that and said, okay, but who have they beat? They beat Dallas before Dallas turned it around. They beat the Raiders. They beat the Commanders. They beat the Saints. They beat the Bengals. They beat the Giants. They beat the crappy Vikings. Who have they beat? Well, now they've gone into Philadelphia and beaten the defending champion Eagles, and they didn't just beat the Eagles. They dominated the Eagles on both sides of the line of scrimmage. They had 2 rushers in both DeAndre Swift and Kyle Monangai, who rushed for 125 or more yards. I think it was Swift for 130, Monangai for 125. Both of them got in the end zone. And then on the defensive side of the ball, they limited Saquon Barkley to like 56 total yards on the day. They dominated the line of scrimmage, and that's what you have to do if you're going to win in the postseason.
Well, and it wasn't just that they came in and ran the ball. It was the running scheme and the pushing and pulling that they had from Ben Johnson, where you're finally seeing why they hired this guy and his ability to game plan against a weakness he's identified and just exploit it. Play after play after play. Also, Rome Odunze had 9 targets and 3 catches, and that was really frustrating for me to watch as a fantasy person who started him over other people who had to get better games. But, to just find a strength and keep going back to it, I mean, when you count all of their rushes, they ran for almost 300 yards. You listed off 250. That tells you where they found additional production on the ground. It was incredible.
Well, and that's a big thing going into Green Bay this week. If they can run the ball against Green Bay, they can go win that game. And then they've got Cleveland at home, which is not going to be an easy game, but a game that they should win. Then they have Green Bay at home. They go to San Francisco, a 9-4 San Francisco team that's a half game back in the NFC West, and then they finish at home with Detroit. So it's not going to be easy, and that's reflected, as we mentioned, in the odds on DraftKings and other sites. But darn it, if that wasn't the best win of the week for me.
100%. I agree. It was legitimacy, and I think very cathartic for Bears fans that before this, they were looking at a 6-game stretch and they were trying to look up and down the schedule on where do we find 2 wins out of this? And then to go beat the Eagles in the fashion they did, there's a lot more confidence going to Green Bay. And then looking at like, okay, maybe we can neutralize Myles Garrett and we can game plan him out. Maybe we can go toe-to-toe with a really hampered Niners defense. And if we split the games with Green Bay, you can absolutely win the NFC North and maybe even hold on to the 1 seed depending on how the chips fall after the Rams bafflingly dropped one.
Agreed. All right, John, I want to talk about 2 sets of games on Sunday. The first set of games, 49ers over the Browns. They stomped the Browns 26-8. And then the Jaguars over the Titans. They beat them 25-3. So both teams win convincingly. These are 2 teams that we had a lot of question marks about. It seemed like they were going to fall off. Both started pretty strong. I mean, the 49ers are 4-1 in the division. They're 9-4 overall. They've lost so many players this season. They still haven't gotten Brandon Ayuk back. They're not going to get Fred Warner back. And yet, the 49ers have had this next man up mentality. They have filled those gaps, and it seems like the team is really gelling. I find it interesting that their Super Bowl odds and their NFC title odds are so long right now. They're not that far off in the division, and right now they're minus 500 to make the playoffs. So Vegas thinks that they will get into the postseason. And does anybody think, as this team gets stronger and healthier, that they can't make a run to the Super Bowl? I do.
The only thing I'll push back on a little bit there is it sounds like Brandon Ayuk is having issues with the front office, and I don't think he's going to play, even if he's healthy or not.
Matters.
And that's, yeah, I agree.
And Ricky Pearsall are an awesome. I think they're so underrated, and I know you feel the same way about Pearsall.
Yeah, 100%. A lot of firepower in that guy, and he's really shown up in year 2 in a big way. And then George Kittle is reverting back to the Kittle of old that we know and love. And when he's not pancake blocking people into smithereens, he's making huge catch and runs and touchdown scores. I think this team is dangerous, and we've talked about this multiple times. This is a team like the Texans where there are certain things about them. The Texans, it's their defense. With the Niners, it's Kyle Shanahan. Nobody wants to play Kyle Shanahan in January. CMC can have an off game. You're still dealing with Brock Purdy, who threw 3 picks against the Panthers, and they stomped the Panthers. Like, it was no question when you got to the second half of that game.
Let me ask you a question about Brock Purdy. Do you think, whether because of injury or performance, we see Mac Jones again before the postseason?
It would only be injury. I think they're riding with Brock Purdy. You also don't pay a guy what you paid him and then bench him for performance. Like,
well, if anybody would, Shanahan would. He's going to play the best quarterback he has.
I could see that. I don't think it'll happen. I think Brock Purdy is still out there and getting the job done. And they're not losing with him. The only other thing I'll say is they got really lucky with the Rams early on, and we've seen Arizona just a shell of itself. The run game's really struggled. They benched Kyler Murray for Jacoby Brissett, late on. They finish against the Seahawks, and the Seahawks have traveled very well this year. That Week 18 game could be for the division, or it could be for seeding, but it's great that they're 4-1 now. I think it's going to be a challenge for them to stay at 4-4, 1 loss in the division long term. And their schedule isn't a cakewalk either down the stretch.
Agreed. Now, I want to talk about the Jaguars because the Jaguars beat the hell out of Tennessee, and they're now 8-4. I'll be really honest. I did not expect the Jaguars to be 8-4 after 12 games. Like Chicago, they're well positioned today, but the road ahead is not easy. Chicago has Cleveland, which is like their easy game. Well, the Jaguars have New York at home, but first they've got to get through Indy at home this weekend, and then they go to Denver, to Indy, and they finish up with Tennessee one more time at home. That is a tough road to hoe, but could they go, call it 2-3, 3-2, that gets them to 10 or 11 wins, and they're in the playoffs.
I think they'll make the playoffs. I do not think they're going to win the division. I personally believe in Houston, or it's going to be Indy. I think it's really going to come down to that Week 18 matchup between Houston and Indy. The Jags, I love where they're at. I just don't believe in Trevor Lawrence's consistency. I feel like Jacoby Myers has actually added something to this offense that I didn't expect to really come full force, even when Brian Thomas Jr. came back and Brendan Strange came back. But it's showing up. The dude's still stretching the field. He's still making big plays. And, it feels like now that he's got a bit of the playbook under him and Brian Thomas Jr. has taken additional attention off of him, we're really seeing this offense, light up a little bit. And it's Tennessee. But also we saw what Cam Ward did to that Seahawks defense. He was able to move the ball. He was stifled the entire game.
Yeah, and I think when you look at the Jaguar defense, they are very good at stopping the run. I think that's going to be important this weekend against Indianapolis because as Jonathan Taylor goes, so goes the Colts offense. And I think if the Jaguars can slow him down on offense, they have tons of weapons now. To your point, with Brian Thomas Jr. back, Jacoby Myers, when Travis Hunter comes back, they've also got Parker Washington. Travis Etienne is performing as one of the best running backs in the league, and Bashal Tutin behind him is not a bad backup at this point. So I think that there's a lot to like. You just come back to Trevor Lawrence and go, the most important person is the QB1. And do you believe in Trevor Lawrence? Like, do you believe more in Trevor Lawrence than you did at the beginning of the year? Do you believe in less in him? Like, where are you on Trevor Lawrence at this point?
I think he's the same guy. And it harkens back to the one playoff game he won was against the Chargers team that they were down 28-0 at halftime. Or maybe it was 28-7. Maybe they had scored going into the half, but they were down big. And I remember watching that, and Trevor Lawrence threw a few different picks. I think he threw a pick six in there. And it was like, the defense wasn't playing bad. I actually put down a little bit of scratch on them to win, and the money line was like minus or plus 350 or something crazy like that, because they were down 28-0. And then the second half, he came out, threw lights out, corrected his footwork, corrected his vision. They didn't throw another interception, and they came back and won it. And I feel like it's just the tale of two Lawrences. And you don't know what you're going to get on a quarter-to-quarter basis, on a half-to-half basis, nonetheless a game-to-game basis. And we've seen that at times this year.
I mean, I would love to bet against him in the playoffs. Don't get me wrong.
Especially He's one of those against a stout defense.
Yeah, absolutely. And you got to... Maybe it's unfair for me to say I don't think that run defense will hold up, but I've seen cracks in that run defense against good rushing teams, including against the Seahawks. And so I know that it can be broken. All right, let's shift. Before we look at our Week 14 matchups, we have an incredibly loaded slate, and we'll talk about what the spreads are and which way we're each leaning on this. Let's talk about who the scratches are for the year, because truly in the AFC, there are only a few teams right now that can't make a run and make the playoffs. Tennessee and Las Vegas are eliminated. Cleveland and New York, the Jets, are 14th and 13th in the AFC. Not technically eliminated, but they're eliminated. Cincinnati is currently 12th, but as we discussed, they're only 2 games back in the division. They're not going to make a run at the wild card. But they could go win the division, so they're still in it. And then Miami at 5-7, don't see a way for them to come forward. Obviously, the AFC East is firmly controlled by New England at 11-2. But that means out of our 16 teams in the AFC, we're talking about 11 that are still alive for the postseason, which is pretty incredible. We'll probably be down, maybe be down to 10 if KC, maybe in either direction, because Houston has a tough go of it. If KC beats Houston and Houston falls to 7-6, we're not crossing them off, but that puts them in a very tough spot.
100%. With the Dolphins, that would mean that they would have to run the table, and I believe they have another game against Buffalo still, and maybe another game against New England. I haven't looked at their schedule recently, but they would have to run the table and then make it in as the 7 or the 6 seed at 10-7. And looking at the teams that are in the driver's seat right now, I just don't see that being good enough. They would need the Bills to drop 3 more, which they could if the Dolphins handed them one of those. They would need the Colts to drop 3 more, or the Jags to drop 3 more. And just like looking at how this is going to frame out, there's only 5 more weeks left in this season if my math is right. I
And they may go win at the Jets, even win at Pittsburgh. But Jets, Pittsburgh, and then home to Cincinnati. You got to imagine Joe Burrow's going to come in firing. Home to Tampa, that winner take Florida game. And then, of course, finishing the year at New England. Now, maybe that game doesn't matter for New England. They sit a bunch of starters. But I agree with you. I just don't see a path for Miami to get truly back into it. And that leaves us with 11 teams in the AFC.
and I think a lot of that's going to be decided this week. I don't
Yeah.
believe in the Steelers. I think the Steelers they're not out of it mathematically. They're not out of it logically when you look at it. I think they're probably going to be the next team that we see fall down to that Dolphins tier of
Man,
you
when
have
you watch them, they just suck.
it doesn't seem like they want to be there. Aaron Rodgers is just his heart isn't in it anymore. Tomlin's going to make a great head coach somewhere else next year is my guess.
Yeah.
He's going to be snapped up in a heartbeat, and a change of scenery, like with Andy Reid and the Eagles way back in the day, might do him a lot of good.
Would anything be crazier than both the Steelers and the Ravens firing their coaches this year and then the Ravens hiring
Flip
Tomlin?
flopping?
Even if Harbaugh doesn't go the other way, but the Ravens going, Tomlin, come on over here.
I
could
would love
see
that.
that.
I would love
I mean,
that.
he has that mindset and that mentality. All right, in the NFC, John, we have 10 teams that are still alive. The formally eliminated are the Arizona Cardinals, the New Orleans Saints, and the New York Giants, who are 3-9, 2-10, and 2-11 respectively. The Washington Commanders are not technically eliminated at 3-9 because of the Eagles' loss, but let's face it, they're out. Same with the Vikings in the 12th seed currently at 4-8, they're out. Same with Atlanta at the 11th seed, 4-8, they're out. But then you get into the mix with Dallas having climbed back into it. Carolina is currently the 10th seed at 7-6. They're very much alive, a half game behind the Buccaneers, who currently hold the 4th seed. I mean, you're talking about one game between these two teams, and they flip from 10-4 in each direction. And then you've got Dallas at 6-5-1, Detroit at 7-5, right outside of the playoff picture, where San Francisco holds down the 7th seed at 9-4. I mean, this is crowded as all get out.
Well, and the Panthers and the Bucks still play each other 2 more times
Twice.
over the course of the season, so a lot's going to be figured out there. Also, the Vikings and Commanders play each other this weekend, so if the rest of the games don't hash out the right way to mathematically eliminate both of them, one of them will fall out. I tend to agree with the Falcons. The Falcons are they're 3 games back from the division with 5 to go, and they've just looked terrible. So I think they're out of it. But I think everybody else is still in it when you look at it.
I agree.
But the hard part is we talked about a bunch of teams being 8-4 in those wild card spots in the NFC or in the AFC. In the NFC, everybody's at 9 wins except for the Packers, but they have a tie there. So for all intents and purposes, they're kind of at 9 wins.
Yeah, agreed. And it's going to be hard to move those teams off their spot. All of those are really good teams. And you look at a team like Detroit and just wonder, how are they going to get it done? I right now, I think if you were going to bet one way or the other, you would definitely bet Detroit no playoffs.
What do you think happens with Detroit at the end of this year? Do you think they go and find a new offensive and a new defensive coordinator, or what kind of shakeup has to happen? The talent on both sides of the ball is there.
I mean, from a Madden perspective, they or the Eagles are the most talented team on paper in the entire league. But I agree with you that they're going to have to shake up both sides of the ball because they just have not looked consistent on either side of the ball. And right now, as I was saying, if you want to bet the Lions, yes, to make the playoffs, it's plus 115. You want to bet them no, it's minus 140. I actually think that's pretty good value on the no because, should they not come out of this game against Dallas tomorrow night with a win, no is going to skyrocket in terms of odds. They're going to shorten significantly or lengthen significantly. And even if they win, it is going to be a hard hill to climb for Detroit.
I think Thursday night's game effectively eliminates one of these two teams when you look at the road remaining and both of their schedules remaining.
Is there anything you want to talk about before we get into this week's slate of games, starting with the Thursday night game?
I had something. It slipped my mind. One thing that's heartbreaking for me is seeing young guys and them not even realizing their season is over. Marvin Harrison Jr. was informed by the reporters that they were mathematically eliminated this week, and that's just nuts to see. These guys want to play. They want to be competitive. It's going to be really frustrating in a few years when he's traded to the Rams for a couple mid-round picks and he's just blitzing all over the Seahawks. So
maybe, maybe. So far, he has been the least impressive of the incredible first round Ohio State wide receivers that we've seen over the last 5 years.
he's the one I always forget. I can list all the other ones. Even Chris Olave, who, is metering away in obscurity in New Orleans, but Marvin Harrison Jr. somehow is even more masked than that.
I do wonder, when you become officially eliminated, what is that going to do to a team like Arizona that had so much fight for so much of the year? They lost 5 straight games by a combined 13 points, multiple 1-point losses in there. And then they've kind of let go of the rope the last couple of games, not even having been mathematically eliminated. And now that they are, you have to imagine that for a guy like Marvin Harrison, who already has had a hard time giving 100% effort maybe on every snap, that could increase. And not only is that going to make it easier for teams that have the Cardinals on their schedule, but I think that it could lead to more injuries. I think, anytime a team is not playing, every guy is not playing at full speed, bad things happen.
One thing that I'm always curious about is when you're mathematically eliminated versus, let's just call it logically eliminated, there's no chance. Like last week, there was no chance. The week before, there was really no chance for the Cardinals to make the playoffs with where they were at, how competitive the division is, how competitive the wild card is. Is that just a switch that flips in your head, or is there pride to play for? And there is
Paychecks.
Paychecks too, but and incentives. Let's not forget incentives
that's
and
what I mean.
contracts. But then on top of it, there are a lot of young players outside of Calais Campbell for this Arizona Cardinals team. You look at their running back room, and Trey Benson is potentially coming back from IR this week. He's a second-year player. Their running backs behind him are also young. Marvin Harrison Jr. needs more reps in the league. Jacoby Brissett's trying out for the next team that he's going to back up and then somehow win a couple games for next year. So there are things for these teams to play for, especially because look at the Cardinals' schedule. Who do they have left? They've gotten a lot of the tough sledgehammer games out of the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely agree. All right. Hey, actually, before we get into this week's slate, I did want to mention a couple more games from last week. I had 2 sets of games. The first one was 49ers and Jaguars winning. The second 2 sets were the Texans beating the Colts and shaking up that race. And then, of course, the Panthers beating the Rams. Which of those was a more impressive win to you?
I mean, the Panthers beating the Rams, and it wasn't a fluke. I know that they had a bunch of turnovers, but that was because they earned those turnovers. It wasn't bad plays. They got after it. They read Stafford, and they played a hell of a game from whistle to whistle, and they got it done in a game that I imagine maybe knocked some people out of their survivor pools. And not a lot of people expected the Panthers to get it done. But hey, the home Panthers, once again, showing up. And
It was the away Panthers. They actually went across the country. Yeah, I know this is the big thing. They're bucking the trends. They went to Green Bay and won. They went to the Rams and won. We got to get rid of the whole away Panthers, home Panthers thing. They're just Jekyll and Hyde because sometimes they look great and sometimes they don't.
They played great this last week. And then for Houston, I think this is one of those tough things where we're starting to watch things unravel for the Colts. We saw Sauce Gardner go out, and it's only a calf strain, so it's not an Achilles blowout, so hopefully he'll be back this year. But, man, between the Chiefs last week and the Texans this week, we could see a path to the Colts potentially missing the playoffs and them having mortgaged their kind of medium-term future to make a run at this and go all in. But when Daniel Jones is playing in kind of a limited mobility fashion and he goes back in the pocket and just can't move, it makes it tough. Although I think he was only sacked 1 time. So credit to him to get the ball out quickly. Credit to them to continue feeding Jonathan Taylor. But, I thought that was really impressive by what the Texans did. I just thought the Panthers punched way above their weight and got it done against a Rams team that everybody has said, this is the clear-cut favorite.
I agree. And, of course, I'm biased because it did help the Seahawks quite a bit in the NFC West race to see the Rams lose a game that frankly, nobody expected them to lose. So, All right, John, let's look at this incredible Week 14 slate. It's not often that we get a great Thursday night game, but we've got a great Thursday night game this week. Dak Prescott, George Pickens, CeeDee Lamb, and yes, George Pickens is first ahead of CeeDee Lamb right now. And the Dallas Cowboys go into Detroit. They've got to go win at Ford Field, where they are 3-point underdogs to Jared Goff and the Lions. Who do you have in this game and why?
I have to just bet the trends, right? Look at the last few games that Dallas has had. Look at how the locker room seems to have shifted. Look at the energy that they're playing with. And their defense has improved. We've seen the trades they made at the deadline, which we kind of laughed at them. But then we saw a few guys get healthy. And then the defense, it's, it's not the Texans, it's not the Seahawks, but it's better than what they had. And when your offense is clicking in the way that Dak Prescott and his receiving duos and Javonte Williams is clicking, and also they're playing with no backup running back. That's the crazy thing, is they're not feeding anybody. It is Javonte Williams and a couple carries from somebody else that's not Jaden Blue. How do I not bet them when I look at the other side of the coin and the Lions are struggling? Now, the flip side of this is the Cowboys, they're still long shots to make the playoffs. The Lions are still in the thick of it, and they know that this is a kitchen sink game. And if they lose this, that's all but it for their season.
I just don't know that they have the firepower right now to put it together, especially if they don't have Amon-Ra St. Brown, who right now is not looking likely to play. And even if he does play, he might just be more of a decoy than anything else. Look, the Lions, John, they haven't put together a complete game since before the bye in week 7 when they beat the Bucks 24-9. Since then, they lost to Minnesota 27-24. They beat Washington 44-22, but that was a severely shorthanded Washington team. They lost to Philadelphia on the road. Not a bad loss, but 16-9. They didn't get untracked in any way. They beat the Giants in overtime at home, and then, of course, they lost to Green Bay on Thanksgiving Day. Not a great run of games. 5 pretty tough outcomes for them, even beating the Giants and having to squeak that out in overtime. I don't know how I could pick the Lions in this game, and so I'm with you. I'm going to go with Dallas, and I'm going to ride this hot offense.
They just don't pass the eye test. I think that's what I'm struggling with here is in years past, you could see the juice on the field, and they just don't have the juice this year.
No, they don't. They don't. All right, so we're both on the Cowboys this week at the Lions. Let's move to Sunday. It starts in the 10 a.m. slate with our Seahawks. The Seahawks opened as 8.5-point favorites against the Falcons. That line has come down to 7, which I think is much more reasonable than 8.5. As I wrote in my blog post this week, 8.5 points is just too much. The Falcons are not a great team, but they do have a good pass defense. They have a really good pass rush with some really, really talented young edge rushers, and then they've got a great secondary. So Seattle's going to run the ball, and Seattle can run the ball. And that means that Seattle is going to probably control time of possession, seek to limit possessions in the game, and that behooves betting a big number on the dog side of things. So, again, I was in the camp of Falcons plus 8.5, but now that it's Falcons plus 7, I think I would actually flip over to the Seahawks at -7 and hope that they get it done in a game that really they should control, although you can't count out the Falcons' offense, even without Michael Penix Jr. at quarterback, even without Drake London. I don't think Drake London's going to play in this game. They're still a dangerous offense, and a touchdown doesn't make me feel great. But this Seattle offense, especially if they can limit turnovers, they should beat the Falcons indoors by a touchdown or more.
The only thing that gives me pause about that is I fully expect Kirk Cousins to throw at least one pick, and he's going to get lit up every time he drops back. But the question is, how many times is he going to drop back when they have Bijan Robinson, especially if they can get him going early? Bijan is the thing that scares me. We've seen a number of games where he can just take it over and lead everything from the Atlanta side and take all the pressure off of any kind of passing attack they need. Kyle Pitts hasn't really gotten it going. He continues to be a disappointment since he was drafted. Like you said, without Drake London, it really puts a hamper on what that offense can do. But there is just that Bijan guy who can blow things up. Offensively for the Seahawks, Sam Darnold hasn't really gotten right yet after that game against the Rams where he threw 4 picks. He did struggle against the Vikings, and we knew he would struggle against the Vikings, right? Like, they don't have uh, a bad defense, and they made it tough on him. The Seahawks also, their run game we know that they can run the ball. The problem is we haven't seen it really. We've seen Kenneth Walker have a 100-yard game against the Titans. They love to kind of change it up with their Thunder and Lightning duo with Zach Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker. I think Charbonnet out-touched Kenneth Walker by one carry last week, so they do ride with the hot hand. But I've seen a lot of games where they try and really force feed that, and if the Falcons can shut that down, that would put the Seahawks in a bind, and we could be in for a 14-10, 17-14 style of game where the scoring's low and it's a lot of punts back and forth and a few turnovers on either side. I'm really hoping that this does serve as a get-right game for Sam Darnold, because as a Seahawks fan, we really need to see that. We saw how his season ended last year. I want to see him build that confidence back up, and selfishly, I want to see JSN break the record. I know he has an extra game to do it versus what Calvin Johnson had in years past, but man, it's there. It's there for the taking.
It got harder after last week, no doubt. But JSN is going to be the key to this game because he is so mobile and he can be run out of so many different places in different formations the Seahawks run that it could be very hard for Atlanta to keep tabs on him. And I think, like Houston, if Seattle should be able to get much more traction on the ground against Atlanta than they did against Houston. And I think if they're able to do that, they're going to be able to move the ball and convert on third down and win comfortably. But I think you're right. There's absolutely a number of different game flows where this unfolds in a tight, low-scoring game that makes it difficult for Seattle to cover 7.
7's a lot of points in any NFL game, and it doesn't matter who you're playing. It could be the Titans, it could be the Jets, it could be the Giants. Like, that's just a big score line, and the NFL's full of talent.
So I'll take the Seahawks -7. Which way are you going?
I'm going to take the Falcons. I just have a weird feeling about this game, and I think it's going to come down to a field goal from Jason Myers to ice it.
Well, fortunately, we have Jason Myers to ice it.
Absolutely.
All right, so the next one is one of the big ones of the week. We have Joe Burrow and the Bengals going into Buffalo. The Bengals are 5.5-point underdogs, and they're 210, plus 210 underdogs on the money line. I like the Bengals in this game.
Show me a single Bills fan that is not shaking in their boots about this game because, again, for the Bengals, they have to win out. For the Bills, they are clinging to seeding right now, and this could be a playoff preview, right? If the Bills wind up as the 5 seed and the Bengals somehow claw their way to that 4 seed and winning the AFC North, this is where we're headed. And you know who the last loss was for the Bills in the playoffs that wasn't the Chiefs?
Joey Burrow.
It was Joey Burrow. And Zach Taylor dominated them in a cold night in Buffalo in January. So, this is a game.
The Bengals have better weapons. I mean, you just look at this game. If the Bills and Bengals defenses show up and just play to their averages, the Bengals just have way better weapons. It's going to be a much harder game for the Bills defense than it is for the Bengals defense.
The only thing I'll say, and I agree, I think it's going to be a shootout. I mean, this could absolutely be a repeat of that Chicago and Cincinnati game where we're in the 40s on either side. And it could be another performance from Josh Allen that harkens back to that Buccaneers game where he had 6 total touchdowns. Like, he's going to have to do this. James Cook is probably going to get a lot of run, but I think a lot of this is going to be on Josh Allen's shoulders. I could also see Joey Bosa making a couple really key plays down the stretch to pressure Joe Burrow and get him off course or get a strip sack that could turn the tide. That being said, I've seen what happens this year when the pressure is on Josh Allen. And yeah, give me the Bengals. The Bengals look like they're out there having a lot of fun. The Bills look stressed as hell.
Yeah, I mean, the Bengals are playing with house money. Total house money. So yeah, give me the Bengals as well. Plus 5.5 just feels like way too, and maybe Buffalo runs away with this one, but the value is all on Cincinnati's side of this line.
I just don't see how they could run away with it. Cincinnati's going to score in this game.
Yeah. All right, John, let's burn through three stinkers. First, we've got Tennessee plus 4.5 at Shadur Sanders and the Cleveland Browns. Who do you like there?
Give me the Browns. I think Myles Garrett's going to wreck that game. He'll probably have at least a sack and a half, maybe 2 sacks. I think that would break the record. I think he was one away after finishing up in San Francisco.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that he's going to get the record here. I think it's fitting that he would get the record against a rookie quarterback like Cam Ward. And I think the offense in Cleveland can do just enough. Tennessee doesn't have a great run defense. I think they'll give the ball to Quinshon Judkins quite a bit, and they'll do just enough to win this game. I don't love 4.5. That's the thing that makes me nervous. I think this could be a field goal game either way. But shoot, if the Browns are going to beat anybody by 5 points or more, it's going to be Tennessee at home. All right, second stinker. We got another Marcus Mariota and the Washington Commanders game. Jaden Daniels is not back for this game, and nor should he be. They should not bring him back this year. It will be probably J.J. McCarthy on the Vikings side. And I think, we're picking this game early in the week. So it's Vikings minus 2.5 at home. And I think that assumes J.J. McCarthy will play, because I've got to imagine if it's Max Brosmer, that flips to like Commanders minus 1.5 or 2.5.
Yeah, 100% agree. Also, when did it become Mariota? Like, all in college, we called him Mariota, and were we just wrong that whole time? Like,
yes. Well, I think this happens a lot, right? You have these players, especially Polynesian players, who they're just happy to be on TV and living their dream, and then eventually it's like, actually, I'd like you to say my name correctly, and then that's hard to break. But yeah, I mean, he'll always be Marcus Mariota to me.
Heisman winner. That was a fun season. It's really tough for me not to take the Vikings after what their defense did to stifle everything the Seahawks threw and just put the clamps on JSN. Mariota, he made some really rough throws and some baffling decisions. He ran when he shouldn't have. He didn't run when he should have. That last throw where if he had just lobbed it over the top like a chip shot in FIFA, he had 3 people he could have thrown to for that last 2-point conversion with nobody around him. It was a great play call, and he just panicked. And I think he's going to really struggle against that Minnesota defense. Whereas if JJ McCarthy's healthy, not even healthy, if he's 70%, and I think they can get to 14 points, 17 points, and that should be enough to get it done.
So I agree with you. And if it is JJ McCarthy, I'm taking Minnesota minus 2.5. Are you still on Minnesota if it's Brosmer?
Hell no. That dude is not an NFL quarterback. Like, what? When you see like an average Joe who says, I could play in the NFL, like Uncle Rico, that was Uncle Rico, right? Yeah. Like,
I mean, it's like an old school situation where he's out of the University of Minnesota, like a hometown kid. And it's like, really, you couldn't find a better backup quarterback than that? It's shocking to me.
Third stringer, to be fair. It's not like he was meant to play that. That was supposed to be Carson Wentz, who unfortunately...
You can still sign guys midway through the year. You can't find somebody better than Max Brosmer. He just, to your point, he feels like a scrub off the street. He doesn't feel like a inadequate backup quarterback. There's a difference. There's like, the backup quarterback is the poor man's starter. He's like an unhoused man's quarterback. Like he's, it's not good. It's not good in Minnesota. All right. So we're both on the Vikings. Our last stinker, we have the Dolphins minus 2.5 at the Jets. And look, the Dolphins have been really plucky, but so have the Jets. And the Jets don't have Garrett Wilson coming back yet, but Tyrod Taylor can move the ball. That defense has some spiciness to it. I don't know. I like the Jets at home plus 2.5. There's no stakes in this game, but the Jets have shown that they're not interested in going and getting the number 1 pick. They want to win football games, and I admire that.
I'm on the flip side of that because we saw the GM of the Dolphins show the door, given a pink slip, and it was like, okay, well, obviously their coach is next, right?
Yeah.
And then the locker room rallied around him, and turns out they really like this guy, and They fixed their
Well, at least they're
running.
willing to play for him.
They're willing to play for him, but they also fixed their running issues from last week or last year. And this year, Devin Achane is just, he's been a beast. They've been running all over people. They have a
Yeah.
top 10 rushing offense. And, this is all without Tyreek Hill. They barely utilize Jalen Waddle. He's more of a decoy than anything else. But this is an offense where it feels like on a week-to-week basis, Tua's only throwing for 150 yards because they're just running it down teams' throats, meaning they limit possessions. But they also have this bad habit of letting teams back in. And I think that might come back to haunt them. I'm going to take the Dolphins because I think the Dolphins have a chance to finish the season really strong, and then look at like what happens if we take a quarterback? What happens if we trade up? What happens? Like, what are the changes we can
Get up
make?
to it for another year, John. See, this is I worry for Dolphins fans because they're going to finish the year strong. They're going to look at their salary cap situation. They're going to go, maybe we should run it back. And no, they shouldn't run. I mean, if they do, they're just going through another year of mediocrity in an AFC East. Like, they need to lose. If anybody needs to lose to compete with the Bills and the Pats over the next 3 years, it's the freaking Dolphins and Jets. And yet neither one of them wants to lose.
Tyrod
There's
Taylor
nothing worse
is,
than mediocrity. There is nothing worse than being 6-11 every year.
and yeah, we've dealt with a lot of that as Blazers fans,
Yeah.
where they're not quite in the best part of the lottery and not quite in the plan. So I hear it. Credit to Tyrod Taylor though. The dude's a gamer, and he's one of the best kind of mid-market backup quarterbacks that you can get. He does this with every team that he lands on. Where
I mean, imagine if the Vikings had Tyrod Taylor.
he'd set up Ross Murr.
Yeah. Or Jacoby Brissett, right? Like a competent backup quarterback. So, all right. Now we're going to get into some good games. And the first one of the bunch is, and I don't know that I would call this a good game, but I would call this a game that matters. And a game that could deliver a surprise result, because who the heck knows what's happening with the AFC South, but who the heck knows what's happening with the NFC South? And this weekend we have Tyler Shuck, former Duck, and the New Orleans Saints going into Tampa as 8.5-point dogs at the Buccaneers. And, I said I thought 8.5 points would be too much for the Falcons hosting the Seahawks. I kind of think 8.5 points is too much for the Bucs here. And I know that the Bucs need a bounce back game. They need to throttle somebody. They have been arrow pointing down for several weeks now, and they're 7-5 sticking in it, but they've got Carolina breathing down their neck. I don't know. I think they win here, and maybe they win by a touchdown. But 8.5 points against a team that can run the ball a bit with Alvin Kamara, that can throw the ball outside the numbers to Chris Olave, that can throw the ball inside the numbers to Juwan Johnson. I don't know. I kind of like the cut of their jib.
Is Kamara playing this week? Are we sure on that? Because I need to go dust my lineup.
I'm not entirely sure on that, but I thought that he was back this week. He's questionable. Again, he was a non-participant in practice today, so it'll be interesting to see if he practices on Thursday. Obviously, if he doesn't practice on Thursday, it all comes down to Friday. If he doesn't practice on Friday, he's not going to play. But my expectation is that he will come back. And this is an NFC South game. He didn't want to be traded at the trade deadline. He was very clear about that. He wanted to remain a Saint, and I think he wants to help this team win. They, like the Jets and like the Dolphins, the Saints do not seem interested in tanking this season.
Well, and the other thing is, Devin Neal, his rookie backup, hasn't looked bad. And
he's not looked bad.
Produced for them. I think Kellen Moore
one of those fantasy guys, right? Like Chuba Hubbard last year. He's one of those guys that if you got Devin Neal or you got Kamani Vidal, he was another one. You remember when Omari Hampton went down and we were talking about who to pick up there, and I was like, I don't know. I think Vidal is going to be the guy. These guys show up, and he's one of them.
It's going to be really interesting to see how Kellen Moore responds as well. He's obviously a first-year head coach. His job is not at risk, so he's out there just trying things and figuring out what's working. Obviously, we've seen what's happened to the Eagles offense since Kellen Moore moved and took this job with what was at the time the worst roster in football. On the flip side, I don't believe in the Bucs to blow anybody out right now. They don't look right. Baker's still not healthy. He's got the sprained shoulder joint, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Bucky
back, which helps.
Bucky's back. Chris Godwin
Running game wasn't terrible without him. I mean that's the thing that you and I talked about several times offline is the combination of Rashad White and Sion Tucker, as your son calls him, was actually very sustainable while Bucky was gone. So Bucky coming back doesn't have the same oomph that getting back Mike Evans or getting Chris Godwin back to health could provide.
Well, and Chris Godwin, this will be his third game back, and his first game back, they had him on a bit of a snap count. They were limiting his pitches, so to speak. Last week, he looked good. I think he had a 57-yard catch. He wound up with over 90 yards on the day. He's really fitting back in and turning back into that go-to option for Baker, especially as Egbuka's kind of, maybe it's tape on him, maybe it's a little bit of regression midway through the year, but Egbuka at this point in the year is not what he was those first 5 weeks when they started off red hot. I don't know. I think the Saints are going to come up and make this a game. I think the Bucs are going to win, but it's going to be a gritty win that they're going to have to really work for.
I agree. And when you look at the Rookie of the Year race, Egbuka was leading that race for the first 7-8 weeks of the season before he got hurt. He's now 3-1, and he's third in the race behind Jackson Dart. And do you know who is actually first in the DraftKings odds right now for Offensive Rookie of the Year?
I do not.
It's Tetaroa McMillan in Carolina,
Okay.
which,
Yeah.
coming out of college, big body, big play wide receiver. And he's had a decent season, a pretty good season, but he's not blowing anybody away. I'm kind of surprised, honestly, that Tetaroa McMillan is up there. And I think it's more of a recency bias than anything because I'm more impressed by the season Egbuka's put together. And I'm more impressed by the season that number 4 in odds, Tyler Warren, has put together than either of them. But I think to your point, it has been a fall for Emeka Egbuka, and I think, hopefully the Bucs do bounce back and they're able to be that offense they were earlier in the year, but we got to see it before I can back them to do that.
100%.
All right. In our next matchup, first place in the AFC South is on the line between the 8-4 Colts and the 8-4 Jaguars. We talked about the Colts. We talked about the challenges that they have not having Sauce Gardner for the next few weeks. Daniel Jones is playing with a broken fibula, which sounds terrible, and I'm sure it freaking is. And that has really limited his mobility. Not just in the pocket, but it's prevented him from scrambling, which has always been a big part of his game. The Jaguars, we also talked about them quite a bit. Their offense is almost back to full strength. They don't have Travis Hunter back yet, but they have a very healthy complement of wide receivers with Jacoby Myers and with Brian Thomas Jr. and with Parker Washington, who not only has been a dangerous wide receiver while Brian Thomas Jr. has been out, but he's also been very dangerous in the special teams game as the kick and punt returner. So Colts are +1.5 or -1.5 now. That's actually flipped a couple of times. This is essentially an old school pick 'em game. So who do you pick to win this game, John?
I'm really struggling on why I would not take the Jags here. That arrow is up and to the right. The Colts is down and to the right. The Colts, we're seeing them, like I said, starting to unravel a little bit. Maybe it wasn't great to trade A.D. Mitchell as we're seeing what he's doing in New York, and he was an instrumental part of this offense very early in the season.
Field stretcher.
Despite the dropped touchdown pass against the Rams. Pittman's really come back down to earth, and if you can stop Jonathan Taylor, there goes that offense with Daniel Jones really struggling.
It all then runs through Warren, and he's
exactly.
a rookie.
So
I'm with you. I don't know how we don't back the Jags here. You always pinch your nose a little bit when you're backing Trevor Lawrence, but all he's got to do is win. And I think more than anything, we're backing the Jaguars' rush defense, and that rush defense has proven that it's worth backing. I think that I feel pretty good with Jaguars +1.5, even if it flips to -1.5. That's one of the games that I really like this week.
I'm on the Jags.
All right. Next up, fighting for the AFC North, we have the 6-6 Steelers and the 6-6 Ravens. It's actually kind of crazy. I was thinking about this. This could end up being a division that's won with a sub 500 record. And the last time that happened, do you remember when?
That was the 7-9 Bucks, wasn't it?
Well, I thought it was the 7-9 Seahawks in 2010.
We've had
And
multiple since then.
have we had multiple
The Panthers won it with Cam Newton, and they beat the Cardinals, and that
at
was after the
7-9 though? I
yes,
remember. Oh, okay. I
yes.
thought that was an 8-8 year.
No, we've had two since then. I believe the NFC South both times, but I could
Oh,
be
okay.
misremembering the second. I know it was the Cardinals. That was the year you and I went to the Rose Bowl. I bet on the Cardinals, or it wasn't the Cardinals, it was the Panthers. The Panthers hosted the Cardinals, and I think it it was a year their starting quarterback got hurt, and they were playing a playoff game with their third stringer, and of course the 7-9 Panthers just obliterated that poor guy. And then I'm pretty sure the Bucks also um, had a 7-9 record. I think that was the first time Baker uh, Baker went to the playoffs with the Bucks, and I think they hosted the free falling Eagles that year that they started off like 9-2 or something, and then lost their last seven straight, and then they went to Tampa and they lost to Tampa. But I could be misremembering that too.
Yeah, I mean they were 9. Tampa was 9-8. They were 8-9. You're right, and they won the division in 2022. So you're absolutely right that was the last time it happened was 2022. So I think we could see it again this year with the AFC North.
Well, and the crazy thing, most times a sub 500 NFL team makes the playoffs, they somehow win their
Win the
wild
game.
card weekend playoff game.
Yeah, go figure that. Go figure that. All right, so Steelers are +6 at the Ravens. Who do you like?
I just don't think this is going to be a 6-point game either way. It's really hard for me to sit here and think that the Ravens are going to hold Pittsburgh to scoring. But then again, every game that Pittsburgh has played over the last 3 weeks, I thought surely they'll at least get some field goals on the board. But they've really struggled to move the ball, and it comes back down to Jaylen Warren hasn't gotten anything going. Aaron Rodgers doesn't look like he even really wants to be there. It's great that they're bringing Adam Thielen, who is like right away their second best receiving option behind DK Metcalf. It's that's a tough one for me because the Steelers defense is still playing tough. TJ Watt is still out there impacting games.
I wouldn't say they've been tough this year. I mean, the Steelers defense, it's been tough to watch the Steelers defense this year, if you ask me. You look at their last several games, they got stomped by Buffalo. They gave up 31 points to Chicago. They gave up 25 points at the Chargers. They have some good performances in there. They had a 12-point performance against the Bengals and Joe Flacco. They gave up 20 to Indianapolis. They gave up 35, though, to Green Bay. They gave up 33 the week before that to Cincinnati. I don't know, man. This Steelers team, like I know they have names on that defense, but boy, the defense has not been good. I'm going to take the Ravens -6 in this one.
The only reason I'm not going to take the Ravens is I just don't think Lamar Jackson is back fully healthy. I think he's out there playing because he needs to be for his team, but he just has not looked right. And the offense is reflected as such. They've really struggled to get things going on a week-to-week basis. And if the Bengals defense could hold them to, 15 points, was it? 14 points? Like, maybe the Steelers can do enough to keep it close. And it's a division rivalry game. As we've talked about multiple times on this program, those games always have a tendency to be weird and oddly close.
Well, Lamar's got to use his legs. He hasn't done that in a number of weeks. And if he doesn't do that, I think you're right. And we'll have to see how this one plays out. What do you think about Broncos and Raiders? Because the Broncos are 7.5-point favorites at Las Vegas. And when you look at, you've got a 10-2 team against a 2-10 team, shouldn't even be 7.5 points. But all the Broncos do is win close games and kind of play to the level of their opponent, which makes me think that somehow, some way, Brock Bowers, Ashton Genty, and the Raiders are going to stay within 7.5 points. What does your gut tell you?
Pat Surtain is going to shadow Brock all over the field, keep him to 2 catches and like 15 yards, and Genty's going to struggle like he struggles every single game. Genty has got to be one of the guys that I expected more of just because he was so transcendent in college, and that's really failed to show up. And yes, part of that is Chip Kelly and his schemes and his as we're finding out, botched play calls.
Yeah, I mean, drunk Uncle Chip can't even communicate the plays in a coherent manner, apparently. What
Now,
the hell?
now question. Are we sure that he's not one of a set of twins and that Chip Kelly we know only coaches in college and his hidden twin is the one who shows up in the NFL? Are we sure? Have we
This is not
confirmed it's the same
conspiracy
guy?
corner, John.
I love my conspiracy corners.
You
But
do.
no, it's one of those things where hey, the new Greg Olson with an O, not with an E,
Mhm.
might be a differentiating factor there, being able to call a cohesive and competent offense. But I think this defense, more than anything else, is one that's going to really make it a struggle for the Raiders offense. But on the flip side, Max Crosby's a freaking game wrecker, and he, like Myles Garrett, just continues to show up for a bad team and keep their teams in it respectively. RJ Harvey has not really taken the reins like I thought he might have when J.K. Dobbins went down, and that does
Again.
open the door. Again, yes, as he does every year, but he could come back for the Super Bowl to make it that far.
Yeah.
And then the major thing is Bo Nix just he doesn't have that number one receiver. We thought it might be Troy Franklin. It hasn't really been him. We thought it
It's
might
not
be.
Cortland Sutton.
Yeah, we thought it might be at the beginning of the year. That hasn't manifested. So, um, are the Broncos going to be able to meaningfully move the ball? I think that's where it really comes into the picture of this could be a 10-3, 10-6, 10-7 game at the end of the day, where yes, the Broncos eke out another really close one, but it's mainly on the back of their defense.
Yeah. Well, AFC West battle, two old school rivals. Give me this one to be close somehow, some way, close enough for Las Vegas to cover the 7.5.
I'm also going to take Vegas 7.5. Yeah.
All right. Next up, we have the NFC North first place up for grabs. The Chicago Bears 9-3 taking on the 8-3-1 Packers in Lambeau Field. The Packers are 6.5-point favorites, and I have to imagine if the Bears hadn't beaten Philadelphia last week, this would be a 7.5 or 8.5-point line. How do you feel about this Bears Packers line?
What disrespect to the 9-3 Chicago Bears, led by Ben Johnson, who has wins over this Packers team. The Bears have to feel like nobody believes in them somehow, despite they're the 1 seed. And this feels to me like it's for so much more than just a final quarter push for the NFC North, like front running position. This feels like legitimacy. Are we real or not? Do we have the juice or not? Are we going to battle for Ben Johnson or not? And man, I didn't believe in Ben Johnson early in the season, but this guy and his play calling and his game planning, he's able to move the ball against anything
Anybody.
thrown against him. Now, their defense is really bad. Don't get me wrong.
I don't even know about really bad. You know, you look at Kevin Byard at safety, and he's leading the league in interceptions. And when you've got a center fielder out there who can take the ball away, that's the thing. If you can avoid breaking, you can bend a bit. And if you take the ball away, and they're the best team in the league at taking the ball away, you can flip a field very fast, and you can make up for some of the mistakes that Caleb Williams is probably going to make.
If he needs to make that many, because they're probably going to stick with their two-headed monster running back. And then here's the other thing. On the flip side, you've got Josh Jacobs, who looked pretty dang good in Thanksgiving. He looked pretty healthy. Is this going to be one of those games where possessions are limited on both sides because both teams are going to lean on their run games, not ask too much of their quarterbacks, and it really will be decided in the margins, meaning for us, close game?
I do see an under on this one. The total's 44.5 points. I agree with you. I like Green Bay plus 6.5, or not Green Bay. I like Chicago plus 6.5 at Green Bay. And I keep eyeing that Chicago plus 270 money line. They can win this game.
They have the juice, and we've seen this Packers team lose baffling games
At home.
that they shouldn't.
Yeah.
Hello, Panthers.
All
They've
right.
also seen them lose it to teams that even on the road they shouldn't. Hello,
Agreed.
Cleveland.
Agreed. Great points. All right, so we're both on the Bears. That gives us 3 games left, 2 more on Sunday, and then 1 on Monday night. The 2 that we have left on Sunday, Rams, Cardinals, and Texans, Chiefs. What do you want to talk about first?
Let's get Rams Cardinals out of the way. I think we both know where we're going to lean here.
Rams minus 7.5. It's a lot of points.
They're going to be pissed off, man.
Yeah.
This is going to want to be a get right game. The Cardinals were just eliminated like we talked about. There might be a little bit of letdown from that. I think the Rams come out throwing haymaker after haymaker, looking to beat up on a doormat so that they can feel really good going into their final stretch.
And the Rams, because they play so many games at SoFi that are filled with opposing fans. The Rams going on the road, I just don't think is as big of a deal. They're not going very far and going down to Arizona. It's a stadium they played in a ton of times. Matt Stafford has played in that stadium a ton of times. I tend to agree with you. This is one of my 3 favorite picks of the week. I think that extra half point is designed to get people to try and grab the Cardinals. But this is going to be Rams by double digits, and I don't think, frankly, it's going to be close. I don't even think the Cardinals are going to have a shot at a backdoor cover in this game.
No,
I think
they're
this is
like
like
a score
33-10 type game. All right. What I don't think is going to be a 33-10 type game is Texans at Chiefs. The Texans are 3.5-point underdogs at the Chiefs. You and I both love the Texans. How much do you love the Texans this week?
This is a kitchen sink game for the Chiefs. They need to win out. They know they need to win out. They're going to bring everything they have. This is also, I believe, a rematch from divisional weekend where the Chiefs were brought to the brink by that nasty Texans defense in January last year. CJ Stroud needs that high level quality win against somebody that is a boogeyman, right? Like all of these teams that want to contend for the AFC, they need to beat the Chiefs at least once. They need to get past that mental block so that they can do it when it matters. Sorry, Bills fans. I know you've told yourself this many times. Sometimes it just doesn't matter. But I like Houston. I know that the Chiefs are going to bring everything, but that defense just isn't what it once was. And I think the Texans are going to have what it takes. Woody Marks has not been what we've hoped he would be this year as a rookie. He's shown a couple flashes, but he's able to get a couple high pop runs, but he also gets stuffed at the line a lot. Thank God they have Nick Chubb to come in as a change of pace, 5-10 carries a game. But I think it's really going to come down to how much this Houston front four can pressure Mahomes and make him uncomfortable, really like they did with Josh Allen. I think it has to be somewhat of the same game plan.
Yeah, I agree with you. Now, I think it's going to be interesting. The Chiefs are not going to have their left tackle, Josh Simmons. He was their first round pick. The rookie was out for several weeks due to a family issue. And then when he came back, he's been awesome. His pressure rate has been 6.6%, according to the NFL stats, next gen stats. That is the 3rd lowest mark among all left tackles. He dislocated his wrist, had surgery. He's going to be out for several weeks. So, that Texans pass rush was already scary. Patrick Mahomes already had to be worried about the Will Andersons of the world. And now he's going to be with a backup left tackle. That can't be good.
He's going to be looking to scramble a lot, but the major thing with Pat Mahomes is he gets the ball out so quickly. And it's really frustrating when you're rooting for a defense against him that every time it feels like they're about to get home, he pulls a rabbit out of the hat and Travis Kelce somehow gets open. And we've seen this time and time again. The Chiefs don't get blown out very often. Rarely, if at all. And this is one that's going to be close. Like, they're going to be in it. They'll probably hold a lead at some point, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Texans have to make a comeback. And this might be one of the toughest games that they'll have to do that against.
Yeah, I agree. Now, again, for me, a lot of it comes down to that Kansas City offensive line. Not only are they going to be missing Simmons, they could very well be without their right guard and their right tackle, missing that entire right side of the line. If the Chiefs are without 3 of their 5 offensive linemen, I can't back the Chiefs in this game. I've got to go Texans. If the Chiefs do get their right side back, I agree with you. Patrick Mahomes is probably going to find a way to win this game in a game that they have to win. And if they don't, the season's over. So right now, I'm going to say, give me the Texans, because I'm not confident that they're going to get 2 out of 3 of those guys back. We know they're not going to get Josh Simmons back. And I think that's just going to be too much. But should they get that right side back, I would flip to backing the Chiefs. Either way, I wouldn't bet this game on Monday or on Sunday night. I just wouldn't touch it.
I can't wait to watch it. I'm very
agree to
excited.
that.
I might bet on some sack props, but I'm definitely not betting the line.
All right, John, last game of the week is Monday night. We have the Eagles -3 traveling to the Chargers, and the word out of Los Angeles is that Justin Herbert is going to play in this game. How do you feel about Eagles -3 at the Chargers?
If they put up another offensive stinker, is that it for their offensive coordinator for the Eagles? Like, that's where my head
I don't know
lands.
how he didn't get fired after last week.
Oh, because he's friends with Nick Sirianni, right? Nick Sirianni hired his boy after
Yeah, but
Kellen
that
Moore
came
left.
after the Dallas game. You're right. Three stinkers in a row. That's terminable.
So that's where my head tells me that the Eagles have to figure something out. Now, are they going to commit to the run or are they going to commit to the pass? Because we've seen they do one or the other, which is agonizingly frustrating. They don't blend their offense accordingly and they don't figure out what's working and then hammer that. It's hard for me to look at that coaching philosophy versus what's on the other side and what Harbaugh's done time and time again with his depleted O line and not think that they're going to be able to get it done. But on the flip side, how healthy is Justin Herbert going to be? Like, are we talking about 60% of Herbert, 80%? It's going to be tough for him.
Now, I will say it's his non-throwing hand. He's going to have it protected. He's probably going to have it shot up. He is going to throw a lot of short and underneath passes to Lad McConkey and crew. And they're going to run the ball. They have to look at what Chicago just did and say, we can do that. And go try and do the same thing. So I think it's going to be, I think the spread is right. I think -3 is dead on where it should be. And I think I'm going to take Philadelphia in this game, but I don't love it.
I'm going to take the Chargers. I think this is going to be similar to the Colts. We're about to see a spiral start from the Eagles that is going to cause a lot of questions. I mean, they're already getting booed in their own home stadium, which I know for Eagles is like a really low bar, but
It's
still,
almost like a rite of passage in every game. Like you go to an Eagles game and it's like, son, you're going to your first Eagles game today. You're going to get to boo the team. Aren't you so excited?
in the first quarter,
Yeah, Dad. I've been waiting to boo the Eagles for years. I just love them so much.
let's go throw rocks at our offensive coordinator's house next, which
No, son, we throw batteries, not rocks, and we throw them at Santa Claus, not houses.
Philly fans are just the most beautiful people.
They are. They are. And they'd be the first to tell you that. They'd be the first to tell you that. So, well, John, so I'm on Eagles. You're on Chargers. It is going to be an interesting week in the NFL. Thank you again for making the time to do this. I have really appreciated chatting through all of these storylines with you, and I can't wait to see how it all plays out.
My pleasure. Can't wait for some football this weekend.
See you, bud.
See ya.